So haps everybody, Joe here, and today I'm going to talk about some modern orchestral mixing techniques. This is great for your trailers, for your metal music, whatever you might be placing it on or under. This is some of the techniques, some of the libraries, and things that I do to make it sound really great. So for example, we have the song Stella from Arch Echo. This is the orchestration that I worked on for that. And I'll just play some of the orchestra here. Soloed for you. Here's the backing track. We're not necessarily trying to make this orchestra sound as real as possible, but rather making it fit the mix, but also sound great. That all starts with your reverb, in my opinion. The reverb is going to be the foundation of your orchestra. Now, for reverb, I love Valhalla Room. I've used it for years. I can't find anything better, so don't at me. Valhalla Room's the best reverb. They have this cool electric blue look now too, so in case you got tired of looking at the red like I did for a few years, now it's blue, so you can't beat that, right? For this song, I used the Church of San Lorenzo preset. I think I modded it a little bit. Pretty generous decay time at almost 3 seconds, and sort of smaller pre-delay time at about 15 milliseconds. So on top of reverb processing, I always like to cut the mud out of my reverb bus as well. That's almost just as important. You can have a great reverb, but you can have so much mud going into it that your whole mix sounds muddy. So in addition to some pretty generous EQ on things like the bassoon, like you just see all the low end is cutting out of like every channel, right? Trombone, trumpet, tuba, violin does not need low end, stuff like this. And then I'm even cutting on top of that on the reverb just to make sure there is absolutely no mud getting in there. That filters into Valhalla Room, and just another EQ on top just for the reverb taste I thought I needed it, I suppose. So I'll play this without reverb here, and then I'll fade it back in. Very sterile, right? It's sterile. It's dry. There's no life to it. Now it's the Harry Potter soundtrack. It's got life. It sounds like it was somewhere. It sounds like it's in a space. It sounds big. Not too much. That's too much later. So yeah. I just sort of filter that back in for taste and see what I like. That is the difference that your reverb makes. But of course, all this EQ and stuff helps a lot too. So all of my instruments are sending to reverb. And how I determine how much reverb to send to them depends on where they are in the orchestra. You want to think about where these instruments are sitting in the orchestra. For example, your percussion is going to be way in the back, right? So for some of these, they might be really caked in some reverb there. Going to give it a pretty generous amount. In front of the percussion, if you're going from back to front, you're going to have your brass. They can have a pretty substantial amount of reverb too, because they're pretty far back. In front of them is going to be your strings sort of surrounding them. They're a lot closer to the front of the stage. And then your woodwinds are going to be up at the very front. So from in order of like what needs the most to least reverb, it's going to be those four. And then choir, I always picture the choir like even behind the percussion and stuff, but sometimes it's in a pit. Either way, it sounds great with a lot of reverb caked on. So I'll treat the choir a lot of times like the brass. In this example here, the choir is actually just doubling the brass the whole time. So they're both pretty thick in reverb. See, that sounds terrible. So that's our room there, and that's the basis for our sound. Went over some of the just instrumental EQ that goes on here too. A lot of the processing I end up doing goes on the buses. For example, in our woodwinds, sometimes it just depends on what library you're using. For woodwinds, I used Vienna Instruments, so all those mics are really close up. You get a really close, really dry sound. And with that, you need to add maybe slightly more reverb than you would to a woodwind. And also, they just needed some general EQ treatment as well. I'll show you on the bus here. So I have the virtual mix rack here on the woodwinds. I have a pretty generous cut at 800 on the custom series EQ and a little bit of air added by the air EQ here as well. So there we go. It sounds like dead without it, right? There's no high end. There's a lot of mids. It doesn't fit our context of a progressive metal song well. Very muddy. Cuts a lot better. That's thanks to the air EQ here. A little bit of a EQ from the SSL one here as well. I like to add aggression to horns. So on top of just filtering out nasty frequencies, I'm going to use something like the FGN. It's a pretty aggressive EQ, especially when you boost up here even a little bit. It cuts through a lot. So I'll show you with and without that there. We're just adding a little shimmer, cutting out a little low end. And that's going to help it better fit our mix. Like I said, Adam's going to kill me if I send him a bunch of tracks with 200 hertz. So just trying to keep Adam happy, you know? Just mixing it. Really light leveling from this distressor here as well. It's like almost not even doing anything, but just for the high peaks. And then the revival here is adding a little shimmer, a little thickness. That's just some harmonic distortion as well. So you're getting just a little bit of action, a little bit of life coming from the revival here. For brass, I use the Symphony Essentials brass library. Sounds pretty good. I was happy with it. Sometimes I'll use the VSL stuff for brass too. I kind of like that. Strings, I've got the Symphony Series String Ensemble. This is such an awesome library because it's got this auto divisi feature, and what you can do with that is if I play one note, oh, why aren't we working? There we go. If I play one note, it accurately has 30 players playing that one note, right? Now, normally with some libraries, when you play two notes, instead of having it split up, it'll end up playing two notes of 30 people playing those notes. So you end up with 60 violin players playing two notes. With this, it's actually going to split it up between two sampled groups of players, if you watch this. And so now we have a group of 16 and 14 playing it. I can add a third note, and it's going to split it up even further. and even a fourth. So that's a really cool factor of this library. So you can do a lot of cool polyphony with this, and it just automatically finds it. On my string EQ, got another virtual mix rack here, and I usually look for softer moves on the EQ for strings, and so I have the FGS going on over here. I'll play just the strings for you. That's without. One thing I really like to do is use this air EQ and set a high cut on it. So it's cutting highs at about 10K, but we're also boosting by 3 dB. And without the high cut, sometimes I feel like strings get way too bright. See, it's really bright, but like without it, I kind of miss it. So it's just a really cool high shelf with that cut in there as well. So you get like what you want and cut out what you don't. And the strings overall, I needed to cut just a little bit more just to get through our thick mix here. Because we got so much going on. So I really needed them to sort of bite, and I think that did a good job of that. Choir, it's going to be double in brass the entire time. I just put a bus EQ, cutting some lows there and some mids as well. And then for percussion, you've just got percussion. Let's see what I did. I did nothing for percussion. So there you go. I think I EQ'd some of the individual instruments if I thought I needed it, like the suspended cymbal, for example. But other than that, I didn't worry too much, just because it was pretty much lower in the mix. So some of that, right? And then that's all going to an orchestra bus. So while my entire orchestra is sending to this orchestral room, that's also going to the orchestral bus. So all the instruments and the reverb are meeting in one space. Sometimes I might put a light bus compression on here, but since I was sending this to Adam later, I didn't know if he was going to process the bus as a whole later. I didn't want to cook in too much compression, so I didn't add it. But normally I would, and he probably did too. But on the bus, very light EQ going on. And a lot of times if I'm EQing an entire bus, what I'll do is I'll flick on this auto EQ as well, just to make sure that I'm not losing a level in my mix. But since this is the entire mix, I didn't really worry about that. And then I've got the virtual tape machines as well, which is one of my favorite plugins. It adds so much sauce to like everything that you throw it on. Like I'll play this without it. And then with. And the thing I like about the tape machines here is I feel like we're all conditioned by music we grew up listening to that was all recorded to tape for like 50 years or so. And we just got used to those transients hitting tape and softening out. And then, you know, we're 10 years, 15 years into the age of digital recording. And it's really easy to get really harsh sounding things. And I think that's because we're not cooking it to tape anymore. Tape did a lot of work in destroying the sound quality, but we're so used to it. And it also just sort of made it more palatable. So the virtual tape machines is amazing because you can just throw it on anything and have a really great simulation of that effect. So that's some of the orchestral mixing techniques I use here. I'll do this a lot for if I'm doing stuff for Arch Echo, if I'm doing more trailer-like stuff with more synths and bigger drums. This is how I'll approach a lot of the mixing that I do. So anyway, I hope you all like the video. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you want to see more stuff like this. And yeah, peace out, everyone.